Welcome everybody to episode 3 of the Shutter Butter podcast, where we talk about non-conventional 9 to 5s, cool passions, and any cool stuff you have going on, and hopefully shed some light on how you can do the same. So today we have a very interesting conversation about mental health and entrepreneurship. We're actually interviewing a good friend of mine who is a Harvard dropout and also the CEO of mettleAI. And if you're not sure what that is, it's basically a startup that made this app that essentially detects mental health deterioration and substance abuse before it's too late. So, without further ado, from Mississauga, Ontario, and literally every other place in the world, because I feel like this guy travels like all the time, Razi Syed, how's it going, man? Good to have you on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I haven't done a podcast before, but I really appreciate this, and I want to support you in any way possible. And I think what you're doing is fantastic. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Not at all, man. So just kind of for context, can you kind of give us like a little like how long have we kind of known each other for, just so the audience kind of has like an idea of that?
It's been ages. I think we first met in like grade 8 when I came back to middle school. But I don't know if we were too close, but like we caught up throughout the years. I remember like I would go for track competitions, and you would just message me on Facebook beforehand, and like
Yo, you
I
going?
don't know. Yeah, exactly. But I don't know. I've always had a lot of respect for you. You're like always a dope dude, and I'm glad you're my friend.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. But yeah, we also had summer school English class together.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was the best part. I totally
Exactly.
forgot about that.
Exactly. The teacher wasn't too good, Mr. I'm not gonna say his name.
Fontaine.
Yeah.
Oh,
Andrew, if you
oops.
listen to this, you're kind of a tool, but I hope you enjoyed the episode. But yeah, man, obviously I've known you for quite some time, but I really didn't know much about your story and much about mettleAI and kind of like this whole mental health aspect of things. So can you kind of give us like a 1 to 2 minute intro of how you sort of went down this rabbit hole, or sort of got like a little bit about yourself and how mettleAI kind of came to be?
Yeah, I think like you mentioned, I think a lot of people don't know when people are struggling. And so, you don't get those like full stories, even when they're close friends. And for myself, like, I think I hid a big portion of my life growing up. But, I went to school here in Mississauga. I went to a high school here and grew up here essentially. And then I went to university at Ryerson. I studied business technology management. I worked there. I was there for about a year and a half. I dropped out. Started working at a couple different startups and businesses. I worked as a software developer, business analyst. Did a lot of growth and working with numbers and data. But then I decided to go back to school for computer science at Harvard, and that happened for a year. But I started working on mettleAI, which comes from my own personal experiences battling and suffering from mental illness and hard drug addictions. And those drug addictions and the mental health issues I was facing was prevalent even while Shoaib and I were friends and he was not aware. And, like for basically all of my high school life, I was on a lot of substances. I was not in a good headspace mentally. I don't remember 2 years of my life, grade 11 and 12. Um, I attempted suicide. I was hospitalized for almost 3 months in grade 12. And I think it was a really tough time in my life. And so the concept of mettleAI itself comes from wanting to make that process easier for others. I don't want people to struggle in the same way that I did. And hopefully, even if I can, help one person or I can improve a certain process by even, let's say 5%, then I'll feel good about myself. And hopefully, we can stack on a lot of 5% solutions and make the world a better place than, we are where we are today. And so that's I guess the gist of it.
Oh, that's awesome, man. And I liked how you said about mental health, how it's kind of invisible, because like I've known so many people throughout my life, and I feel like a lot of them have claimed to have had like a mental struggle or some kind of mental trauma or mental illness, but you can't notice it just by looking at someone. Like I've been good friends with you for a while and I had absolutely no idea because there's no like telltale signs of it, right? Like it's, I think I read a stat where it was like almost 50% of people in the United States have had some kind of like mental illness at some point in their adult life. And to me, that's just crazy because like it's so hard to tell that sort of thing. So are there kind of like any early like telltale signs when somebody is kind of going through something wrong or something not a good headspace?
Yeah, I think we're like deep diving into the core of what we're trying to solve with Metal AI already. But I think to kind of backtrack a little bit, I think that is one of the biggest problems that we have in mental health. It's really hard to measure. When you have someone that's facing diabetes, you have very clear marker signs that you can look out for and track. You got your blood glucose levels, you can track A1C, you have your CGMs and ways to monitor that throughout the day. But with mental health, a lot of that is subjective. And mental health and psychiatry itself is a very recent industry and sector. Like even into like the 80s, we were doing lobotomies on people and removing parts of their brains to make them feel happier. And so, if you think about it, compared to every other facet of healthcare, it is new. It is a recent development, and we're still, not caught up with any other area of healthcare. And so the biggest problem with psychiatry is the lack of objective measurement tools. You can't just look at a person and hear what they have to say and be like, yeah, this guy has depression, this guy has schizophrenia or anxiety or ADHD. It's really difficult to tell. And so we wanted to create these objective measurements, these objective metrics to track that can help predict the onset of an episode or be able to predict the severity of an episode before it happens. So you have like the DSM criteria, which is essentially the Bible for mental health care professionals, where these are the symptoms that make up this thing that we call depression. These are the symptoms that make up this thing that we call OCD. And a lot of these symptoms are like, loss of energy, a loss of mood, a loss of appetite. But what does a loss of energy really mean, right? Like, we don't really quantify that. Like, if I went to a psychiatrist today and I told him that, over the last 2 weeks, I've been feeling a little down, they're going to use that information to be able to make a diagnosis, but it's full of biases, it's full of inaccurate information, and it's just not the best form of information. And that's not how it's done in any other area of healthcare. And so we link back with Metal AI, we link back those subjective markers and symptomatic behaviors with hard metrics that you can track passively through your phone, through wearable devices like your Apple Watch, or you got this ring, the Aura ring, and be able to quantify what loss of energy means, loss of appetite really means, what all those other symptoms in a much more objective manner.
Yo, that's awesome, man. Because like I don't want to say I've ever like been depressed, but I've definitely had like times or like periods of like of a certain amount of time where I'm just like really bummed out, or I kind of think like, where's my life going? And I'm not even in. Sometimes even I like kind of I kind of even put it off because like I don't really think it's that big a deal. And do you think that's kind of something that people do? They kind of like put it off because they're too busy. They kind of say like, no, you know what, like I can't be a bitch. I got to put this to the side and just kind of like grind through it. Like, do you think that's a big issue? People just kind of putting it off to the side?
And that's one of the symptoms of mental illness, if you think about it. And
Thanks,
so
man.
it's like a catch-22, right? Like you don't know, essentially, and it's a really tricky position to be in, because when you're going through a tough time, your mind gets clouded, and so the information that you can expel is not the best information, right? But you're the only person that has that information, right? So what do you do then? So with us, what we thought about doing was, like, if you're feeling down, you go downstairs and you see your mom will be able to figure out that you're feeling a little down right away, right? She has that intuition. She'll be able to look at your face and be like, yo, Shoaib, what's wrong? And that motherly intuition is just a question of data, right? Like she has seen you throughout your whole life. She's seen you throughout your good times or bad times, when you're sad, when you're angry, when you're surprised, when you're feeling all these emotions. And she's been able to put these pieces together and build this thing that we call intuition, right? And intuition, again, is purely a question of data. So if you have the data to be able to put those pieces together, you can really understand a person. You can personalize a treatment plan specific to that individual at hand. And motherly intuition is really freaking cool, right? And if we
Exactly,
can
bro.
scale that and provide that motherly intuition, that motherly care to everyone, that's amazing.
I absolutely love that, man. But speaking, so I know this works off like Metal AI kind of works off like a machine learning algorithm where, like what you just said, it's using past data to kind of make a prediction based on past data. Because like your mother, it's seen you, it knows when you're happy, it knows when you're like sad as shit, it knows when you're like pissed off and stuff. So using that information, they can make an accurate prediction. What was the process like in like gaining all this data? Was it kind of like a volunteer basis? Because it sounds like you needed a lot of data to be able to accurately, kind of analyze people like patients, how patients are feeling, right? So was it what was that process like gaining all that data and was it like a long process?
Yeah, so there's two main ways that AI-based or like a machine learning-based company gets their data. One is using publicly available data sets, or kind of automating that data collection process. But very common now, especially on the enterprise side, is that you have to collect that data manually. And especially in areas where there is no data and you're collecting data that was never like previously available or like labeled in the right way, you have to collect that manually. And so the way that we did that was we used a little bit of previously collected data. It wasn't the best form of data, like it was very unclean, or some of these data sets have like small sample sizes or just not collecting the right metrics that we're looking for. And so we had to collect our own data. And so that's through clinical trials with McMaster University and St. Joe's Hospital in Hamilton. And we're working with a bunch of different labs throughout basically Canada. We're working with a lab in University of Waterloo called the Ubiquitous Health Technology Lab under Dr. Plinio Marita, and a bunch of researchers at CAMH and University of Toronto. And so just looking to collect as much high quality data as possible through patients that are actively seeking out treatment, that are on medication, that are looking to get better. So that's kind of like where we targeted our data collection process.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned that data in the past wasn't really that good. I think like those questionnaires where like if you would go to like kind of like a clinic, if you were kind of feeling some type of way, if I can if I can call it that, there'd be like these own questionnaires, I think, right? I think I read that on one of your blogs. It was like it's like this own questionnaire that says like, oh, how are you feeling? It's very like bias induced, right? Like, oh, like, do you have this? You sure? People just kind of fill out those questionnaires just because they want to get it fucking over with, right? So, what
Mm-hmm.
I guess my question is like, what kind of problems do you see with the current health industry regarding mental health? Because I do feel like a lot of the things you explained are that the current kind of idea of solving these mental or treating these mental health issues is based on more treatment rather than preventative cure. So what are some other kind of issues you see with the current industry and how like metal AI has come into like fit that need? Because I know you mentioned you had like some addictions in the past, so you definitely must have seen like what was wrong and found the need in the industry, right?
Mm-hmm. And I guess tying that back to what you just said, like the idea of metal AI did come from my own personal experiences, but I knew the perspective from a patient side. I knew how shitty that process worked, and I knew that it didn't work for me. I didn't get better from the treatment that I was provided in a country like Canada. I got better. I still have my ups and downs, but I'm in a much better place than I was a couple years back because of things that I had to do on my own. And I think when I was coming up with the concept of metal, it was based on a lot of collaboration. I didn't really have all the pieces together. I knew that there was a problem. And the way that I kind of, put those pieces together was reaching out to everyone I know. I reached out to professors, researchers, psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, like a bunch of healthcare organizations. I reached out to CAMH and Canadian Mental Health Association and kind of really drilled down on what the most prevalent problems were in that space. And I think, those questionnaires like the PHQ-9 and the GAD-7 is like the only tool that we have right now at our disposal to understand how someone is feeling and if the severity of their illness is worth psychotherapy or medication or whatever it is, right? And so those patients self-reported data points leads to subjectivity, recall bias, and it's very burdensome on patients to complete. Like if I'm feeling extremely down, I do not want to go into a doctor's office and like fill out a fucking checklist, right?
This is what I'm feeling. This is this. This is this.
Right. And so the only tools that these providers have at their disposal are things with poor data collection methods, right? And so because of this whole process, 50% of people that go through treatment today fail to recover, right? And those numbers are even higher for people with bipolar and certain forms of addiction, and it goes up to 90%. So even if you're actively seeking out treatment, like you're on medication, you're going to a therapist like every 2 weeks or monthly, 90% chance that you're not going to recover. And I think that's brutal. That's fucked up, right? And I don't know.
It's like you get like it's like you get LASIK or something, and then they're like, yeah, you know what, buddy, there's like an 80% chance you might never fucking see again. Like you cool with that? And then you're kind of already in the chair, and you're like,
Like I got my wisdom tooth out recently, and like if I went to the dentist and they said that like there's a 90% chance that we're not going to be able to take it out and you're just gonna it's gonna hit your nerve and you're possibly gonna die. Like that was how severe my wisdom tooth was. Like I don't know, I'd be pissed. I'd be kind of pissed. So we're hoping to change this with that continuous objective data collection that's from forms of data that's already being collected and being used by all these other companies, possibly maliciously, right? Facebook already has your location data and your call history and all these other data points that you can think of as very personal. But if we can use data to improve someone's life and make them, help them take control of their mental health and be able to understand, themselves better, I think that's a good use of that data, right? And so we're not really changing. No, we're not like really like developing new measurements. These forms of data is already validated and been used in clinical trials, and we're collecting like 40 data points that we didn't really have to like create a new sensor for. Like you got your heart rate, your sleep phases, your calorie expenditure, and all those other forms of data. We just aggregate it and quantify those things like stress and appetite and mood and energy, and provide them in a way that links it back to those symptomatic behaviors so that the clinicians, the healthcare providers, and the patients can really understand themselves and see a clearer picture of how they're progressing with their treatment plan.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned the Facebook thing. So you're watching us just like Mark Zuckerberg is, right?
No, not necessarily. Like all of it is all of the data that we're collecting first has to be approved by the patient. So even if there's certain data points that they do not want to get collected by us, or first of all, we're not even collecting any of that data. Like we're not storing any of that data. We as a company cannot have access to any of that information, right? All of it is encrypted and it only gets passed to the clinician that they're seeing directly. And we do not sell any of that data. We like anonymize the data and de-identify any, like direct linking information to a certain patient. So I think that already separates us a lot from Facebook and Google and Twitter and all those other companies.
Absolutely, man. And that's interesting because my other question was going to be like, what kind of biomarkers do you guys look for? And how do you know that like X amount of sleep and X amount of like step count? Because I guess those are some of the metrics that you use, like step counts. I think you mentioned sleep and other parameters like that. How do you know that they translate into, a lot of sleep translates into less stress, or a lot of this translates into like, how's it kind of tested in that sort of sense?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question because we don't know. We don't know, and we're not the ones that are going to be able to say that like this is what translates into this. Um, I don't think we will ever know. I think what our goal is to be able to collect enough data for a specific person, that sets a baseline information for that user individually, right? So for me, I'll be able to step, 10,000 steps a day, and I'll collect that data for 2 weeks. And if that goes down to like 4,000 and continuously just starts going down, that there is some deviation in behavior happening, right? And that deviation from baseline is like where that real insight is, right? From that specific individual, right? Like, I don't care how much you walk. I don't care how much, this random person with an opiate addiction in Vancouver walks. It matters about how much I walk and how much, right? And so when you look back at all of those different data points that we're collecting, right, like the ones that you mentioned are more physiological in nature. And so that data point is really valuable, but when you compare it from your baseline deviation. But we're also collecting digital phenotypes. So this digital phenotyping data is information about how you use your phone, right? It's the latency between your typing. It's how the gestures used to swipe changes over time. And these minute changes are very indicative of how a person is feeling and how a person might potentially relapse. Because, yeah, again, it's not how you do it necessarily. It's the deviation from your normal, regular behavior that, provides that insight.
Yeah, it's like the mama instinct, just like you said, right? Mama sees you all the
Exactly.
time, so she knows what she knows when something's up, right? Like she's
Exactly.
like, oh, hi,
Exactly.
hi, Razi, fuck you, mom. She knows something's wrong, right?
Yeah, I
I
guess,
would
or she
hope
might
so.
just slap me.
Exactly, man. But I like how you mentioned that, but you did mention that you kind of like recovered yourself in terms of like mental health, despite like this shitty. I think you talked about like the GAD-7. I think it was like these. It was like one of two only questionnaires to diagnose like mental illness. After going through that whole like horrible process, and I think you said grades 11 and 12, where you attempted suicide and things like that. How did you kind of like how did you kind of recover from all that despite everything being like, being so poor in terms of metric data? Like, and was that process kind of gradual, or was it like instant to recovering from that mental state?
Yeah. First of all, there are more than those two measurement tools, questionnaires. So there's PHQ GAD, but there's more than 100 more for a variety of different illnesses. You have a suicide severity scale. Like there's just a lot, but it's just a matter of like the clinician actually using it in practice and the patient being willing to do all those questionnaires, right? And sometimes like you can bundle a bunch of questionnaires together and that can take up more than the session length, right? And so if you go see a psychiatrist, the whole session you're just going to be filling out checklists. So that's also a shitty part there. But for myself, I went through treatment for quite a few years. I was put on a cocktail medley of just medication.
Oh,
I, I,
nice
I,
little
I
drink.
I think at one point I was like taking 6 pills 3 times a day and I was just zombified. And that's kind of why I mentioned like I don't remember. I literally do not remember maybe 95, 99% of grade 11 and 12. Like like I just cannot recall it. And those medications, I think they can help some people. I think there is some value in it. I think there is value in these questionnaires. I think there is value in psychiatry and treatment and therapy. But it doesn't work for everyone, and you have to use it correctly, right? We have all these tools in our tool belt. It's just a matter of like, actually hammering the nail where it needs to be. But like, we don't know where those nails are clearly at the moment, right? And so I think the biggest problem that I had with treatment was not just like, like the type of care that I was receiving. It's just that, I don't know. I think there was a lot of problems with treatment. Maybe it was my psychiatrist. I went through a lot of different psychiatrists, but I think mostly it was a lot of to do with my own biological health, right? You can't necessarily link external factors and put blame onto, it was the people I was hanging out with. It was how hard school was. It was my family environment. It was, like shitty medication. I think, like mental health, it's more of a brain disorder, and you have to think of it like a chemical imbalance, right? It's actually a brain illness, right? And so there were a lot of factors that weren't conducive to my recovery. And so when I was hospitalized for 3 months after my suicide attempt, I think it did help me for a bit. I got out of that hospital, and I relapsed within a week. I just came back and I did Xanax, and I just did like a bunch of other drugs, and I just like it was really difficult for me to recover until I decided to really take matters into my own hands. And after I graduated high school, I went to a city 17 hours north of here called Thunder Bay. And I decided to go somewhere where I didn't know anyone and just completely change my whole environment and start fresh. And I think seeing the people there and meeting new people, like these guys were young professionals. Some of my friends there were lawyers, doctors, they were into politics. They were actually doing stuff with their lives, and it kind of helped me strive to be better. But I think that's the story that I tell like to most people. But I think on this podcast, I can be, pretty transparent. I think the biggest thing that was conducive to my recovery specifically was the use of psychedelics on my last day of high school. I had this shrooms trip, magic mushroom psilocybin, and I think it was probably the most impactful, hard moment that I can pinpoint on a day. That was conducive to my recovery, that was conducive to, being a changed person, being who I am today. And I don't think I would have done, even 1% of what I have done. I think I would have been dead without that moment in my life. And I think there's a lot of value in it. We're working with psychedelic medicine companies now. There's like you might not be aware, but there's a renaissance happening in the psychedelic medicine industry. There's educational institutions like UFT and Johns Hopkins that are doing a lot of research on the use of these natural medications and fungi to be able to improve mental well-being. And Johns Hopkins, for example, they just released that study recently, just a couple months ago, or like a month and a half ago, for saying that psilocybin is 4 times more effective than antidepressants with just 2 doses. And I think there's a lot of value into it. There's definitely a lot more research that needs to be done. There's a lot, like clinical research that needs to be done. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence, but I think there's a lot of promise there. But I think regardless of psychedelic medicines having an impact on me, I think mental health care as a whole needs to improve and get away from, cocktail medleys on medications, and needs to get away from, a subjective measurement tools. And there's a lot that we can do. There's companies like Prairie Health that are doing genetic testing for predisposition for mental illness for certain patients. And I don't know, there's a lot that we can do to improve, and I think we're inching towards there.
Damn. So a little high school celebration of taking some shrooms almost did the trick, right? For a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it was a high school celebration. It was on my last day of school. Like right after I finished my last exam, I just like downed a couple grams of shrooms. Um, but I think, like, definitely I still have my ups and downs. I recently got through a funk. I'm not going to say that like I'm 100% better, but I think it's in a much more natural kind of progression. Like, I think those ups and downs are very human, and I love that. Like, I find value in the downs too now, right? And I love that.
Yeah, I've heard with like mental health addictions, there's like really high, really steep highs and really deep lows. Whereas like for somebody who's not really suffering, like everybody has ups and downs, just like you said, right? But they're much more steady, I guess, and they have kind of like an upwards trend where your overall like your state is pretty is pretty good. But things with people with like bipolar disease and stuff, or people who are on opioids or like stuck on addictions, they have really high highs, but then really low lows. Do you think that's something common, like in terms of any addiction?
Yeah, bipolar is basically marked by that. You have the manic and the lows, the depressive episodes, and like some of those episodes can last, quite extensively. But like addiction works a little differently. You have certain drugs that can essentially change your dopamine levels naturally and sets a different baseline for you biologically speaking, right? And so you take, for example, cocaine, you take like some other drug, and your dopamine level rises and you feel really good, you feel really happy, and you take it again and it goes up. And if you do like continuous takes, right, like you have an addiction at this point, your dopamine baseline level goes from here to here, right? And if it's here and you're not constantly reaching this point, your body is going to get really confusing. That's why you have withdrawal symptoms. That's why you feel those come downs and crashes. um you're fucking with your body at this point, right? Like, I'm not anti-drug even now. Like, even after my addiction, even after taking all those drugs, I did everything. I did meth, heroin, I did Xanax for so many years, but I'm not anti-drug. I'm for responsible use. I'm for understanding how your body works and being able to do something that is safe for you and safe for the environment around you, right? The people around you. And if you can't handle that, then like there is a problem there. Not many people can, but I think responsible use leads to safer use as well. And that's why a lot of cities are, contemplating decriminalization for a lot of these drugs, because it's not going to, rise the rates of people having overdoses. It's going to lead to proper services being implemented citywide or by not-for-profit agencies or by public companies for responsible use. And that responsible use is very important.
Yeah, dude, I'm sorry I didn't know about like how you forgot about grade 11 and 12, because to me I thought those were like some two really fun years for like us and like Ali and like all of our other friends. I thought those were like really fun years for all of us. So I don't know. It's crazy because I never would have imagined that like you were going through like all these like different sets of addictions. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you're a pretty like you're a pretty you might be like one of the lucky few, because you mentioned like 90% of people don't recover, and maybe the shroom strip was was a big game changer for you. But um you're do you think that you were pretty lucky with kind of like the way it went out, as opposed to like how other people would go if they just try to like figure it out on their own?
Definitely. Like, I think luck has massive, massive part to do with my recovery and just who I am as a person, and like, everything that I've accomplished and I am working towards. I think luck, this part took me a long time to really understand, but luck is like kind of provided, but it's a matter of like seizing that opportunity and being able to take advantage and take those risks that are necessary to be able to really utilize the benefits of the luck that is being presented to you at different moments of your time, right? And so I think like I definitely did take a lot of risks, and I did things that conventional and orthodox necessarily. But yeah, like I think a lot of people don't have that luxury. And unless we improve the resources and the services that are available to society as a whole, then more people are not going to have that opportunity to be able to take matters into their own hands. And so like I'm definitely very, very lucky. I want people, like I want everyone to feel that luck as well, right?
Yeah. Oh, dude, I 100% agree. I think like if in order to be lucky, you got to be good and you got to have like kind of the right attitude, just like you said, right? And you got to be good to be lucky. You got to be lucky to be good. Like I feel like they come hand in hand. Like luck, maybe it might be something you can't fully control, but then there's ways of seizing that luck, just as you said, right? And my next question to you is kind of like, do you think some people in different kind of cultures or areas, like economic or socially wise, are more prone to kind of mental health issues? Because me and you are both are both people of color, right? And I feel like in our religion, in like a South Asian, Central Asian kind of culture, mental health almost wasn't even a real thing. Like how we're brought up and like how we're grown up, right? We're almost never taught about it. So do you think there's more? There tends to be more people from a different kind of, I guess, ethnic group or social class than other groups.
Definitely. I guess I can more so speak on South Asian culture and Pakistani culture. But definitely like growing up, like we did not talk about our feelings or, toxic
Exactly.
masculinity was
Well, bro, my dad,
practiced religiously by my dad.
bro, my
And
dad was
so,
just like, "Don't be a bitch," and then I would just.
yeah, and that stuff gets drilled into our head, and we don't really talk about our feelings, we bottle it up. And like even when I was hospitalized and I was going through all those illnesses, I like my mom would say, you're not praying enough, or it's the
Oh.
devil, it's shaitan, like it's all these different things. And like it got to a point when I was hospitalized, they wouldn't even visit me, right? They didn't
Oh
come a
no.
single time, right? And so there's a lot of things that they don't understand, and I guess are a little stubborn about. But I think times are really changing. I think when I think about how mental health was talked about from when I was in middle school, or a little even later, like maybe like 5 years ago, like things have changed, right? We're talking about it. And I think COVID, um, albeit very fucking shitty, and has exacerbated like a lot of symptoms and mental illnesses and even addiction for a lot of people. We've slowly started realizing the importance of mental well-being and being able to practice self-care and be able to do the things that you know make us feel good, and understanding those values and understanding our own personal beliefs, and being able to prioritize correctly. I think COVID had allowed us to like really sit down and think, right? I think that's pretty cool. I think a lot is changing. COVID has definitely accelerated digital health and technology in the field of mental health care. But yeah, like going back to the culture stuff, um, I think there's definitely a lot changing. There's a lot that needs to be done. I think like a couple months ago, my mom told me that like Razi, like I feel sad, and I just hugged her. Like I was so shook. Like she's telling me that she feels sad. She's never done that, right? Like my parents have never like cried in front of me, or like
Yeah, well, because they think they got to be they got to be this like resilient, um, motherly or figurely figure. They got to be this like this macho man who doesn't like show their feelings. So that is a little scary, because that's what you're kind of grown up to believe, that nothing can hurt my mom, nothing can hurt my dad, kind of thing, right?
hmm yeah, like I don't know. It's really difficult, and I wish we could do more for our parents and the South Asian community, and cultures that are disproportionately like impacted. Um, and there's definitely that a lot needs to be done for that.
Absolutely, man. And I know you mentioned how you got away out of the city. Like you said, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna leave Mississauga. Dude, I've wanted to leave the city for so long. Nothing against Mississauga. I've grown up here. It's my
A
hometown.
lot against the Mississauga. I fucking hate
You know?
Mississauga.
I love your Bonnie Crombie. No. But Bonnie Crombie's all right. The old one. Who's the OG? Hazel McCallion? Nah, she's
Hazel
chill.
McCallion.
She's chill. She's chill. Like I've grown up here and stuff, but I do feel like getting away for a little vacation really like clears my mind and just makes me more like not well-rounded, but just kind of like more appreciative. So when you went to Thunder Bay, or actually, I think the last time like I was in contact with you, you were on a beach in San Diego, or like Los Angeles. I think you're in Santa Monica or like Loyola, San Diego, or something. But so, do you think that was really good for you, being like away? Do you think that's a good treatment for somebody, like taking a little vacation, getting out of their city, and experiencing something different if they're suffering from some kind of like mental health?
Honestly, I've been thinking about this a lot recently. I think I was listening to this podcast with Keith Rabois. He was an early founder of like an early employee at a bunch of really major companies like Facebook and PayPal. And he's a VC now, venture capitalist. And he was talking about how he never takes breaks. He never takes vacations, right? He's very known for that. And he's really old now. But like he's never taken a vacation. But he does this thing called micro breaks throughout the day. Like he takes, a solid 2 hour block every couple of days, and he does nothing, or he does stuff that relaxes his mind. And I think that it might work for him, right? And I think what I've seen is that a lot of people try to idolize these great startup founders and entrepreneurs and just people in society, the richest, and they try to emulate their day-to-day habits, to a point where like it's very cultish. They like if people, like people like try to see how many hours someone sleeps, and if people knew how many times like Elon Musk like takes a shit, they will try to emulate that. Like I think to that point, like there's a lot of harm. And the best thing that I did for myself is understanding like how I work specifically, and what things work best for me, right? Like I love going camping and going on hikes and like resetting my circadian rhythm, because that like really allowed me to understand my biological clock, right? Like I cannot sleep before 3 a.m 4 a.m, right? Like I know like how my body works. I know where my productivity plateaus. I know where it peaks, right? Like I can understand like how I work best, how I think best, how I can take breaks best. And I think a lot of it is a matter of exploration and doing the grunt work and figuring out what works best for you and like tracking it correctly, because we can go through the motions. We can try to emulate the schedules of different people. Like I saw a YouTube recommended video of like some guy like emulating the Picasso schedule, where the routine where like he wakes up at 11 a.m and like I think to that point that like I don't like it. It doesn't sit right with me. I think we're all individuals and we work differently. And like for example, like I have ADHD, and I think we think of ADHD and autism and depression as very debilitating fucking illnesses, like where someone who is facing bipolar, they're either like Kanye West level, but there's a whole spectrum, and there is some value in these illnesses, right? Otherwise like natural selection would have eradicated them, right? Like all of these illnesses, we can't think of them as something that needs to be cured. It's something that we need to understand better. And that is my opinion. It is a controversial opinion to some, but I think like for going back to the ADHD, like I love having it. I think it is a fucking superpower, right? Like I was just reading this book called Delivered from Distraction. And I think like when I found out like how to utilize my ADHD best, like it changed the trajectory of my life, right? Like I know that like it's really hard for me to focus. Like even right now when I'm talking to you, like I've probably zoned out and like I like
Oh, dude,
spun off.
you're giving some good value. I'm enjoying this. Don't even worry.
But like I start talking about all these different things, right? Like my mind is all over the place. But for me, like when I learned that like with ADHD, I have this thing that I coined, like that I call tunnel vision, which is actually called flow for some people. But like I used to get into these zones of tunnel vision where I think about that task at hand and absolutely nothing else there, right? Like I won't even think about like eating or taking a shit or like using the washroom, right? Like I will just focus on working for 8 hours and that's it. Like I won't think about anything else, right? And being able to understand, you know, how to get that tunnel vision engaged, it was really cool. And I think of that as a superpower rather than like, you know, I don't want to be normal per se. Like I have insomnia too, right? Like I'm diagnosed with insomnia. I used to be on medication for so many years, sertraline and whatnot. But like I love it, right? Like I can learn how my body functions and I can work around it. It might impact me like, you know, 50 years down the road and I might die earlier or something, but you know, like 8 hours of your day is a lot to do stuff, right? And being able to like maximize your time. I don't like being wired all the time and doing stuff all the time, but like I think there is value in being like in understanding how you function best, right? And for me, like that also includes taking those vacations. I think I'm due for another one. I need another one soon and fuck COVID. But like yeah, like for me, like I love traveling. I love experiencing new cultures, doing new things and you know, exploring and like that's why I got into photography for a bit and you know, like I just love doing stuff.
Man, dude, I 100% agree there. Because like, what works for you might not necessarily work for me, or work for like Joe Schmo or whoever there is, right? Like Elon Musk never takes a shit, by the way. Just in case Elon Musk, just in case you're listening, man, I'd love to have you on, but no one. There's some people who your lifestyle just wouldn't fit. I know my lifestyle wouldn't really, or Elon Musk's lifestyle wouldn't really suit me. So I love how you said that, man, because like you got to know what your like kind of what your strengths are instead of looking at like ADHD like, oh yeah, like it's this bad thing or it's this horrible thing. Look at it as like, man, I can literally like use that to my advantage, which is what you did, right? You started reading a new book, you started getting tunnel vision, like you said, for I think you said something like 8 hours a day or something like that. You would just focus 8 hours just nonstop. But yeah, speaking of like Elon Musk and like Mark Zuckerberg and all those ex Harvard grads. Well, actually, they're not grads, and Elon Musk didn't go to Harvard, but that's okay. But we're seeing more and more of like kind of Harvard graduates drop out and focus on their startup. So, and I know you're also getting looped into this group as well, which is pretty cool. But did you ever receive any kind of resistance into, oh, you shouldn't drop out? Because dropping out is not an easy thing to do. Dropping out is something I've done recently, actually. And I did receive a lot of, so I still am kind of receiving a lot of like resistance for it. But did you kind of receive any kind of like, resistance against like following your passion to make metal AI and dropping out of Harvard? Because Harvard is a pretty big name school, especially computer science, the degree you're studying. What was that? What was that kind of like? How'd you transition to it? Give us the whole spiel on that.
So I dropped out twice. The first
Oh,
time I dropped out, I didn't tell my parents for like a whole year. I didn't tell them actually at all.
oh, dude,
I
I think they're due for an explanation.
like I so the whole story behind that is that like I watched the Secret Life of Walter Mitty, and the dude like travels through Iceland and it was just beautiful. And I looking for tickets to Iceland and I saw this like Wow Air ticket for like $30 and it was a
Wow
one way
Air.
ticket, but I'm like, fuck it, like I'll do it, right? Like
Wait,
so
wait, hold on.
I booked a one way ticket.
Is Wow Air the one where it's like rate us on TripAdvisors and there's just like ads like throughout the plane?
Oh, they're defunct now. I don't think they exist anymore.
Oh, okay.
Like they went bankrupt. But
Go on.
basically,
Sorry.
like I saw that one way ticket to Iceland, and I was like let's do it, right? And I just dropped out that next day. And like I didn't think about it much. I just like made that decision because there was also this like other quote by a writer, and it's like applicable to writing, but it's something like, if the writer is not enjoying the process of writing, then neither is the reader, right? And so if I feel like I'm not really enjoying the thing that I'm doing, then the end product of it will not be as of value to the people that I'm doing it for, right? And so like I truly do believe in, you know, following your passions and doing the things that you believe in and value. And so what I was doing in school did not fit that bucket, right? And so I dropped out and I started traveling. I started working, and like I worked at RBC for a bit right after. And I just told my parents, and just like continuously did that. Like I extended my co-op 8 months now, 12 months now, right? And I just kept on doing that until I went back to school at Harvard, and I was there for a year. And then I dropped out, and this time like I told him that, like, you know, I'm going to drop out. Like I need to work on mettleAI. Like it's something that I hold very near and dear to my heart. And oh man, they were pissed. They were so angry. Like Harvard is like on every parent, South Asian parent's mind. And I have this like one uncle in California who's very wealthy. Um, very wealthy, and he offered to pay for my education and my tuition and boarding, and pay me a salary of 250K a year on top of that to go back to school. And like I had that opportunity because he was pissed, right? Like he was like, what the fuck are you doing with your life? Like, why are you doing this to yourself?
He's
And
giving
so I
you a pretty
definitely,
good. He was giving you a pretty good offer there.
yeah, I know, but it was a tough decision. No, it wasn't actually. I right at that moment I was like, no, I need to work on mettleAI. I just will not feel satisfied. I will not feel content if I'm working on anything else right at this moment. And so I can go back to school if I need to. It's a plan B at the moment, which sounds weird, but like mettleAI means a lot to me.
Oh, dude, that's crazy. And that's like a good. That's kind of a good like representation of what this podcast is. Is like going through what your passion is rather than going like the unbeaten path, which is, or sorry, the beaten path, which in
The
this case
beaten
would be
path.
going to Harvard. I mean, you were offered a little bit of a salary as well, but I think that's awesome how you just kind of stuck with it and you just still, because metal ad just means so much to you based on your past experience. I think that's something that's really really interesting, man. But a lot of the times when people try and start like their own business or they try and start their own startup or something like that, I feel like people don't really understand the grind or how much effort it really takes to start something right up from the ground. Can you kind of go into that process a little bit? Because I know you said you were starting it while you were at Harvard. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what's that process like? Like, 'cause I know you're balancing school and you're balancing a startup. So how'd you kind of like, what was that process like? Like how much work and how much dedication did you have to put into getting this up off the ground so that you could drop out?
I put in a lot of work, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions to entrepreneurship. I think it's become like a buzzword, and the meaning of the word has been diluted to some degree. I think like a lot of people get into it, or they start this online business or whatever it is because they're like, fuck the 9 to 5, or I don't want to be someone's employee, you know, like I don't need a boss. I want to have that flexibility and whatever. But at the same time, you're going to be working more than 9 to 5. It's going to be less flexible because you're working all the fucking time, and your boss is going to be yourself. And I think that's the most difficult part, because the people that have the tendency, or, you know, like the drive to be able to start their own thing, are the same type of people that are really fucking hard on themselves. And so for me, especially, like I don't have a boss, right? Like I am my own boss, but I know myself and I'm really fucking hard on myself. And I will give myself a shit ton of work to do and deadlines that are so arbitrary, but like I feel like I need to finish it. Otherwise, like I'm fucking up, you know? And so like I'm my own boss, but I'm harder than any other boss that I've ever gotten. Right? And so there's a lot of misconceptions. It's really difficult to start your own thing. There are there's still a lot of really difficult nights where I'm thinking like, is this the right thing for me? Like, did I make the right decision? Like, am I fucking stupid? Like, what's wrong with me? Right? Like, all my friends have graduated university at this point. A lot of them, like, went throughout that traditional path. They're working as a consultant. They're, working as a software developer here. They're doing that, and like some of them are reaching upwards of 150K or whatever salary, and I look at them, and these guys have taken that traditional path, and some of them, like some of my friends are getting married at this point, right? Like one of them,
Dude,
like his wife
help
is
me out
pregnant,
here, man.
right? And so, like, what am I doing with my life, right? Like,
Bro, I'm like still on the
I
apps, like just swiping. And then
oh yeah.
our friends are getting married and shit.
And my mom, like, she talks about bio data. I don't know if that's the concept in your household, but like, like these arranged marriages and like hooking people up together in South Asian culture. Like my mom is like sending me a bunch of listings, but she's like really worried for me, and she's like telling me like I need to stop fucking up my life, because like what if the girl's parents ask like what my education is, right? Like, or does he have a degree? And like, because I don't have a degree, I'm never going to be able to get married, right? And so my mom gets like
Dude,
mad
just
about
just
that all
deceive
the
them, just like you
time.
deceived your parents, dude. Just be like, yeah, I'm still at Harvard, and then just keep saying, yeah, I'm still at Harvard, still there. Then by the time you're like 50,
I'm doing my internship.
I'm doing my internship. Yeah, man. Is that like, I don't know if you've seen the show Indian Matchmaking. It's like it's on Netflix.
Oh yeah. My mom and my sister watch it.
Okay, that would explain a lot in terms of the sending you listings. But yeah, man, I love what you said about entrepreneurship, because I feel like it's become such a buzzword. And you see these ads all the time, right? Where it's like, look at me, 4-hour work week. And there's guys like asking people, hey, how much did you make this week? How much did you make this week? And then he's like talking to the camera saying like, dude, I made this much money and I worked 3 hours today. That stuff is so fucking bullshit. I'm gonna call I don't remember anyone's name on there, but if I remember, I will call them out in the next episode, because usually these people are full of shit. Because first of all, they're probably living in some shithole country in like South America or like Southeast Asia, and these 4-hour work weeks don't exist. Like, you're putting more time than you would in your 9 to 5, because this is because you're your own boss and you have to set deadlines. And like you said, you're somebody who sets hard deadlines and is really hard on themselves, but it gets things done, right? And I think that's like a really important thing that people don't really understand. Like, it's a lot of work. It's not just, oh, all the freedom in the world, all the money in the world, all the traveling in the world. No, like, you work probably twice. You probably have 60 to 80-hour weeks, maybe 100-hour weeks probably. I'm guessing, like, you're always thinking about mettleAI, probably, right? Because it's just such a big, it becomes a part of you. And I think that's a thing that people fail to kind of evaluate when they make that jump. But another thing I was gonna ask is, I know computer science and like machine learning isn't really for everybody. At least like that's what I was told when I was taking courses in that. But do you have any advice for anybody who's like struggling in CS or computer science or anything like that?
um Honestly, like, so I'm not a really good coder. I'm not a good programmer. That's not where my forte is. I love the concept of computer science. I love the theoretical aspect. And so I was a software developer. I worked as a software developer for a while, and I still do programming on the side, like for side projects for fun and whatever. But like, I wouldn't call myself software developer. I wouldn't call myself a coder. I'm not like my mind does not just function in the way that like I've seen the elite do it. And I think the reason I did do computer science at Harvard rather than another school was because, one, it's a liberal arts college, right? So the core curriculum of computer science at Harvard is not as technical as you would do computer science at Waterloo. And it's just not as intensive, technically speaking. Like, it's actually pretty fucking easy so far, right?
What?
So, yeah, like I honestly, like, I think people at U of T, Western, York, even like
Represent.
Waterloo, like some of these students I've seen struggle harder than the students I've seen at Ivy Leagues or Berkeley or Stanford or whatever. I think some of them, like, I don't know. I have a lot of, I'm not against the education system. I'm against Canadian education system, first of all. But like how we've kind of set it up is not conducive to the success of a lot of students today. And I think the thing I liked about Harvard is that it allows you to focus on things that are much more applicable. Just like how my time at Ryerson was so fucking easy, right? Like I was able to focus on side projects and go to hackathons while I was in the business program, right? And just like build my software portfolio and get a software job after dropping out of the business program after a year, right? And so like that easiness allows you to be able to like do things that, feel like you want to be doing. And I think that is applicable for anyone, right? Like if you're in computer science, like work on projects that you feel passionate about, right? Because if you're just doing like the algo problems and you're just working on like assignments, you're never going to find that thing that makes you feel passionate about the thing that you're doing and like the end result of what you're building and the value that you can push out into the world and society at large with what you're building, right? And the skills that you're accumulating. And so man, like I think software development is really cool and the people that can do it are fucking cool. And like similar with like designers, we're like, it's kind of like magic, right? Like you think about something, a software developer can fucking make that, like a really talented one. Like you think about like a designer, right? Like they can think of the concept of a table, right? Like a business student will think of the concept of the table and they'll list out a fucking shit ton of benefits. Right? You can place your things on top of it, whatever. A designer will be able to help you like visualize it. And that's really helpful too, right? Like I think they're, in some ways it's more beneficial than that business student, but a software developer will fucking build that for you right away. And like you can start using the benefits like from that. And I think they're like, I think it's really cool. And if you work on things that you're passionate about, like you can definitely find that area that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like I always recommend people to like find a little side hobby or find something that they're somewhat passionate about because it keeps that creative side alive, And and if it's a passion and you're really passionate about it, who knows what you can kind of make out of it, right? But just a few more questions before we go. I know you've gotten a lot of kind of funding from things like DMZ and other incubation places in the United States. Can you kind of run us through like what that process is like getting those grants?
Um, yeah, so it kind of varies. So, like funding sources kind of range from grants and competitions to venture capital and private equity, and then you have government funding as well, right? They kind of work as kind of like grants as well, but like much more difficult. For DMZ and like these student-run incubators and competitions, like it's essentially just a competition. You submit a proposal, you compete on top of the stage, right? Like we competed for the DMZ competition and we ended up winning it. And you just kind of like, I know startup founders that rack up like 5,000 from here, 5,000 from here, 10K here, 25K here, and they get enough to like really get that ball rolling for their company, for their startup. And there's a lot of resources, there's a lot of money being thrown out, and if you have a good idea especially, and universities are definitely a great ecosystem for that. Like I'm sure Western has a lot of resources for that, like competitions that happen left and right. Enactus itself, like where we got our major funding source initially for our company, like it was a 25K grant, non-dilutive source of funding. That organization Enactus has chapters across all major universities across Canada, and I think some in the US as well. But like there's a lot of money if you have good ideas, right? And I think getting money is really difficult too, though. You like we're fundraising is a difficult task. It's a full-time task. Like we raise money from venture capitalists and all these incubators and stuff. You have to be truly passionate about the idea that you're working on. You need to show that progress, show the value that you're putting out. And yeah, it's there's a lot of resources.
And these are grants, right? They're not loans.
No, 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 no. Most of them are function as grants, especially the student run ones. And then if you go into like the private equity or venture capital route, they work on the equity based range. Generally speaking, there's other vehicles of funding, right? Like you got your safe and convertible notes and convertible debts, but generally speaking, it's equity based. So it's like if you have a pie of your company, they take a slice of it. And if you have an exit, which is like an IPO, which you get listed as a public company, or you get acquired by a larger company, that's an exit event. And that's when these investors get paid back, right? And so you got to think of like that return that these investors will get. They generally want to see a 10x return, right? So say they invest, 10K, they want to get 100K back during that exit event. And so that's kind of how it works.
So it's like Shark Tank, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a lot like Shark Tank.
Interesting, man. And before we end off, do you have any advice for anybody like struggling through mental health, or anybody that wants to reach out to you or mettleAI, or where they can like kind of download the app and get it?
Yeah, so downloading the app is not possible. We function on the B2B side, so we sell to healthcare providers and insurance providers, and they give it to their patients. So if your clinician is not using mettleAI, then you're kind of SOL for now. But like you can tell them about it, tell your provider about it, and they can reach out to us, and we can help them get onboarded. But for reaching out to me itself, like I'm very available. Like you can email me at razi@mettleai.com, or just shoot me a message on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, wherever the heck you want. I'm really bad at replying, but I will reply. And if you're struggling for mental health, I know like throughout this podcast, I was just talking shit about the resources available, but there are resources and they are helpful for some people, right? And even if that gives you a slight chance of, being in a better place than who you were or where you were yesterday, then, that's a win in my opinion. Right? And so it's worth trying. It's worth, pushing a little bit further. And I think, like it's very difficult, and like it's not hard, it's not easy, but there are a lot of resources and a lot of people out there that want the best for you and want to take care of you and want to help you be better, and like reach out to your friends, reach out to your family, reach out to me, reach out to if you're going through a crisis, then go to the emergency, like actually try your best to take the initiative to be in a better place, and
Or take shrooms.
Yeah. Possibly.
Or go to Thunder
responsibly.
Responsibly. I don't want to be liable for anything. Yes, yeah, exactly. Man, it was so good to have you on. We'll put all your information in the comments box below so people can kind of reach out to you. But thanks so much for being on, man.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this. Good luck with your podcast. I'm excited to see where this goes.
Oh, me too, man. Me too. Take it easy.